Imagine a king crowned in his youth, already marked by an incurable disease that should have kept him from the throne. And yet he becomes a revered, feared, and even sacred figure to many of his subjects. This is Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, the so-called Leper King. But what few people know is the collection of stories, miracles, and beliefs that emerged around his figure. To many, Baldwin was not just a king. He was a living sign of divine providence. In this video, we will delve into the legends and superstitions that circulated in the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem during the 12th century. Accounts of mysterious healings, prophetic visions, spiritual interpretations of leprosy, and even comparisons with biblical figures. Was Baldwin truly seen as a messenger of God? How did these ideas influence his political authority and the morale of the Crusaders? Stay with us until the end and discover how faith, fear, and mysticism helped shape the image of a king who defied not only enemy armies, but also the limits of human understanding. The Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, founded after the First Crusade at the end of the 11th century, was a fragile Christian fortress surrounded by rising Muslim powers. In the 12th century, religious fervor and fear of the unknown fueled deep beliefs in miracles, relics, and divine signs. The coexistence between West and East created a cauldron of intense spirituality, where kings could be seen as either saints or the cursed. It was in this environment that Baldwin ascended the throne, a young leper who in the eyes of many defied human logic and seemed to act under the direct shadow of God's will. From his youth, Baldwin already seemed to carry an air of mystery. It was William of Tyre, his tutor and later official chronicler of the kingdom, who first noticed the lack of sensation in the young prince's right arm. The diagnosis of leprosy could have meant the end of any noble's career, but not Baldwin's. On the contrary, the fact that he survived the disease for so many years and still ruled with wisdom and courage was interpreted by many as a true miracle. In medieval religiosity, leprosy was seen sometimes as a curse, sometimes as a blessing. In certain Christian circles, it was believed that lepers were being purified in life, suffering for the sins of the world, and therefore closer to God. Baldwin then came to be seen by many as an atoning king, an almost messianic figure whose pain had a sacred purpose. His disease physically distanced him from others, but brought him closer to the divine. Among the people and Crusader soldiers, stories of an extraordinary nature began to circulate. One of the most talked about involved the victory at Montgisart in 1177. According to later accounts, Baldwin, only 16 years old and already weakened, personally led a charge against the much larger forces of Saladin. The victory was so unexpected and overwhelming that it was soon attributed to divine intervention and to the presence of the Leper King as an instrument of that higher will. Some chroniclers said the crusade was saved by a miracle and that Baldwin, even while ill, shone like a living martyr. Another legendary account concerned the king's supernatural resilience. Despite the brutal progression of leprosy, which left him increasingly weak and blind, Baldwin continued to reign and lead military campaigns. To his contemporaries, this was not merely courage. It was a sign that God was directly sustaining him, almost as he sustained Moses with uplifted arms in the desert. In critical moments, it was said that Baldwin spoke with a firmer voice than expected, that his countenance became serene and radiant, and that his mere presence on the battlefield lifted the spirits of the knights. The court itself fueled these stories. Monks and clerics saw in him a new example of redemptive suffering. There are records of pilgrims who tried to touch the king's robes, hoping for blessings or healing. And according to chronicles from some European abbeys, relics supposedly associated with Baldwin, such as a piece of his battle tunic, began to circulate as objects of veneration after his death. Not all of these stories can be historically verified, but their symbolic power is undeniable. In a time when the line between miracle and reality was thin, Baldwin's life fed the imagination of Christians seeking signs from heaven amid the Holy War. The leper, who should have been a symbol of impurity, became for many a sacred king, a living martyr who reigned with the marks of disease and grace at once. As Baldwin's reign progressed, the elements of holiness attributed to his figure became not only popular beliefs, but also political tools. In an era marked by internal disputes and constant external threats, the image of the sacred king functioned as an ideological cement that held together the fragile structure of the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem. Those who wished to question his authority found themselves facing a dilemma: how to oppose someone seen by many as chosen by God, someone who, even leprous and weakened, won battles and governed with justice. Some feudal lords, doubtful of his ability to maintain power, backed down out of fear of offending not only the king, but also the divine will that supposedly kept him alive and lucid. Moreover, the accounts about Baldwin served as powerful moral weapons in the Crusades. Preachers used his image as an example of resilience and faith. If a young king consumed by leprosy could remain firm in the defense of the Holy Sepulchre, what excuse did the healthy and wealthy knights of Europe have not to take up the cross? Baldwin's diseased and mutilated body became a symbol of the Holy Land itself, wounded, attacked, but still upheld by divine providence. Within the palace itself, the myth also influenced the dynamics of the court. At certain moments, Baldwin found himself forced to make unpopular political decisions, such as removing ambitious nobles or preventing dangerous alliances. In these cases, his sacred aura served as a shield. His opponents, even if they doubted the truth of the miraculous stories, feared the reaction of the people or of God. There were even some within the court who believed that touching the king, even using cloth or gloves, would bring luck or spiritual purification. However, there is also a dark side to this process of mythification. As the disease advanced, the king's body became a living portrait of suffering. His fingers atrophied, his eyes weakened, and his ability to move became limited. Even so, he was expected to be present, visible, as a symbol of resistance. This cult around the image of the Leper King may have pushed Baldwin beyond human limits, demanding constant exposure from him, even in the most painful stages of his illness. Records from the end of his reign show a king who, though physically disfigured, remained politically lucid and spiritually venerated. When, for example, Baldwin established the regency of his nephew and attempted to organize a stable succession, he acted with an authority that went beyond strength. It was a kind of sacred charisma that allowed him to restrain, even temporarily, the voracity of the Latin barons and the threat of internal factions. After his death in 1185, the myth did not die with him. On the contrary, the absence of his figure strengthened the legend. Copyist monks continued to reproduce accounts of his miraculous courage. Artists portrayed him with discreet halos in manuscripts, and pilgrims began to visit his tomb as if it were that of an uncanonized saint. There were even those who prayed for his intercession in times of danger, as if Baldwin were a spiritual protector of the kingdom even after death. The legend of the Leper King, so human and so divine, crossed the centuries, leaving in the memory of the Crusades a unique example. That of a monarch who, though fragile in body, became immense in spirit. And thus, between leprosy and light, was born the myth of the sacred king. The story of Baldwin transcends the limits of a mere reign. By facing leprosy with dignity, courage, and faith, he did not just rule, he inspired. His body, marked by disease, became a living banner of Christian resistance, and his figure crossed time as one of the most singular of the Middle Ages. In a world where physical suffering was often associated with divine punishment, Baldwin subverted that logic. He became, in the eyes of many, an almost prophetic presence, a symbol of atonement, strength, and holiness. More than ruling Jerusalem, he reigned over the imagination of a people in constant search for meaning. amid holy wars, external threats and internal disputes. The myth of the sacred king is not merely a medieval curiosity. It is a reflection of a time when faith and power were intertwined, and where holiness could emerge even from the deepest pain. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, had you already heard of this almost mystical side of Baldwin? See you in the next episode, where we'll continue uncovering the echoes of the past.